What are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing?
Pretty
Good to
good.
see you.
Good afternoon.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? I see we have someone from Howard County. Are you presenting today on your food council?
It looks like we got you right as you were eating, but the answer is no. I love it. That's teamwork, virtual teamwork. Well, thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you so much. But we would like to eventually talk to you about how this miracle happened.
Yeah. No, it's my first time joining this meeting. I am new with the LHIP program in Howard County, so I'm excited to learn more about other people. So, but yeah.
We actually have a work group around supporting food councils in the state. And if you would like to join it, I would love to have you join it.
Oh, yeah. That'll be great.
How are you doing today, Summer? And Pam?
Good. Doing well. Enjoying the sunshine and all the good spring stuff we've got going on.
I know I'm sitting here. I was just on another meeting. I said, it looks so nice outside, but I'm cold.
That's true too. I am in a sweater and a turtleneck, so I feel you on that.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. No new pictures?
From Annika?
Yeah.
I think we did have one or two cute new photos I'll have to pass along. Adorable little baby. So
Yeah.
it's nice. Hi everyone. We're gonna give folks a minute or so to join, because I think we're expecting some more people to trickle in.
While we're waiting, Summer, we can do introductions because I see a couple new faces. So I can start if that makes it easier. My name is Diana Taylor. I am the committee chair of distribution and access. Anne Marie.
Hi, Anne Marie Hart Bookbinder, Director of Food Security Programs at the Montgomery County Food Council.
And if we'll just call on somebody else after you introduce yourself.
Sure. How about Kara?
Hi, I'm Kara Panowitz with No Kid Hungry Maryland. I just jumped on, so I don't know who else has gone yet or not.
Pam,
So
Just me and Deanna.
I'll
I'll go. I'll go.
I don't
Pam
even know if we
Allen.
can.
Pam
Oh, yeah,
Allen.
Pam, go for it.
Okay. Pam Allen, Executive Director of Metro Mills till Monday on the Eastern Shore. I'm located in Cambridge, Maryland. Oh, let me see. Cameron?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Cameron Pollock from the Maryland Department of Aging. I'm the Food and Wellness Coordinator. I will call on Stacy.
Hi everyone, Stacy Kabopsik with MyBigCo, and I'll call on my boss, Steve.
Good afternoon, everyone. Steve McHenry, also with MarBidCo.
Julia, we're just
I'm
introducing.
Nelson Escobar. I'm the Associate Dean for Extension of the University of Maryland and Eastern Shore.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Jennifer, okay. Who hasn't went? Whoever has not went, if you could just come off mute. Shannon, hi Shannon.
Hi, sorry, I've been in meetings since 9 straight today, so I'm going to be off camera as I try to shovel food in my mouth, which is obviously great for distribution access, but I'm with the Maryland Department of the Environment. I'm responsible for our wasted food law within the state and recycling market development.
Anyone else that hasn't introduced themselves?
I can go ahead.
Thank you.
My name is Maddie Bedford. I am with the Howard County Health Department with the Local Health Improvement Coalition, and I am the new director.
Welcome. Anyone else? I saw that my co-chair just came on, Meg. We were just doing introductions.
Oh, great. Oh, great. I'm sorry to be a couple minutes late. Hi, everyone. I'm Meg Kimmel with the Maryland Food Bank, and get the wonderful opportunity to co-chair this subcommittee with Diana.
Joseph? We're just doing introductions. I saw you just joined us.
Oh, sorry about that. Joe Liu, Director of Advocacy and Public Policy at the Capital Area Food Bank.
Welcome, Lindsay. So I think we have everyone. Summer, we can go ahead and get started.
Perfect. Awesome. And it's great to hear everyone who's on the line. For those who I don't know, I'm Summer Model-Fino. I'm the Deputy Chief Resilience Officer for the state of Maryland, and I'm filling in for Annika Lefebvre, who normally is in this role while she is very happily on parental leave. And so with that, just a quick overview of the agenda. The first thing is I'll hand it to Diana and Meg to do their usual welcome. We've already got a head start on introductions, which is great. And then we'll go through some quick announcements, but what we'll spend a lot of time on in this meeting is getting some updates from the ad hoc recommendations groups, especially hearing where you're at in terms of drafting the recommendations and if there are any places where you need support or can anticipate issues with the timeline. And then we'll get into what it's going to look like to share those draft recommendations with state agencies for feedback, and then some next steps. So with that, I think we just kind of did a roll call, so I'll quickly go through the list and throughout the meeting, just in case there's anyone that I've missed, or if anyone joins. And if anyone has joined since we went and did verbal introductions, please go ahead and put your name and title into the chat. Thank you. And with that, I will hand it to Diana and Meg.
Well, I just want to say to everyone, welcome. And I look forward to spending the next hour or so with you as we get updates on everything that's happening. Meg, I also would like to ask that if you feel comfortable, if you could give us an update on some of the cuts that may be affecting our food supply.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Should I do that now?
Summer, is it okay if she does it now?
That's totally fine if that works for you, Meg.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I was kind of, I wanted to start off by just acknowledging that I know that all of us are feeling the impact of all the change that's happening coming out of Washington, and it's creating a great deal of uncertainty and loss, actual loss in programming and funding and food and all those things. And so I know everyone on this call is impacted by that to a degree. And so again, just wanted to say that out loud and just express that we're all, in solidarity around trying to do everything that we can to mitigate or repair or rebuild or hopefully alleviate some of the things that are happening. So it's just a really chaotic time.
Meg, can I just add that I'm so glad you said that. And I also just want to say to encourage, we have to encourage one another.
Yeah, that's very important. So we have been tracking along with the news. It's probably close to 2 weeks ago now, we learned officially that 2 programs that are funded by the USDA had been canceled. One is the local food purchase cooperative agreement that is administered through the Maryland Department of Agriculture. The details on that are that the grant has shown up in 2 phases. So far, we are in phase 2. Phase 2 runs through November 30th. That will run intact. That has not been canceled. Any contracts with farmers here in Maryland or watermen or producers of all those, any stripe of producer that we're working with or Capital Area Food Bank is working with, those contracts will be paid and honored. What has been canceled is what was being called LFPA 25. It was round 3 of the funding that would have picked up, we're assuming, December 1st, and would have been worth about probably $4 million in food purchasing contracts here in Maryland. So that program has been terminated. We are in heavy mode around and high gear around advocacy and media relations, talking with elected officials here and in DC, and also contributing to the news cycle that is creating pressure around these things. So as of now, that's our strategy on LFPA. And then early last week, as we looked into, we are also the state's TFAP administrator. And as we looked into our ordering platform, we noticed that some of our orders were marked as returned, and we didn't know what that language meant, and USDA had not provided any guidance to us. And so we started looking around, and then the news story broke last week, which I'm sure you've all seen. So TFAP orders have been canceled. You see it coming out under the headlines of USDA canceling food distribution to food banks. And so, we are actively trying to understand the impact of those cancellations. TFAP is a really dynamic program. It has multiple channels, is probably an easy way to describe it. You can get food here, you can get food here, you can get food here. The third channel, which is what typically flexes under new administrations or changes under different administrations, that is the channel that is being where the cancellations are coming in. So it does mean less food will be coming in through that program. It will be, we don't have a number yet, but it's almost certain to be more than a 15% reduction in the amount of food that's coming in through that program. It might be higher. And then there may also be some offsets, some mitigation, some offsets where those other 2 channels might get there may be some opportunities there. So more to come. Again, same strategy. We're advocating in every direction that we can, contributing to the story in the news. Saw Capital Area's CEO was on CNN yesterday. So, the story's out there, and, again, what can you do to help? Just talk to your elected officials, talk to everyone you can to try to again, get these programs reinstated. And the piece that we don't work with, but that also travels with LFPA, maybe someone else on the call can talk about it, is the farm to school program was also reduced as part of that first round of USDA cuts. So not good news. And obviously the question comes up, who fills the gap, right? So, we are not in a position to fill the gap. The private philanthropic community is also really stretched right now because of all the other cuts to federal programming. And so the ask of private funders is astronomical right now, off the charts. So it is really going to be a tough time. And I think, Diana, where you left us is right. We just have to take care of each other. We have to collaborate. We have to be transparent. We have to cooperate, and we have to try to work together as best we can. But that's what I have to share on federal cuts, and I'll continue to keep everyone updated as we know more.
Thank you, Meg. Joe?
Yep, go ahead, Joe.
Underscoring everything that Meg just said, the other part, and this is where I'm probably a little more Cassandra-ish, is that there is a potential upside. These effects that we're seeing are there's a significant lag time, right? LFPA for us at the Capital Area Food Bank, what was canceled was largely what we were planning for next year's growing season, not this growing season. And with TFAP, we often order months ahead of time. So the loss takes a little while to show up. In the meantime, we think at the highest level political sort of environment, that with the ongoing trade and farm politics of this new administration, there will be a need to support farmers, support those affected by trade policies. And if we look back to the first Trump administration, and I think a lot of people don't know this, there were two trade aid packages that directed $2.6 billion to TFAP and food banks for distribution to our neighbors. Just to give you a sense of how big that is, that exceeds by about 50% what the federal government did in response to COVID for TFAP and food banks. So the trade aid could be very, very significant and very, very large. And what's important from our perspective is that we find the right messengers to deliver these messages and demonstrate how closely intertwined what farmers need and what we have to do to protect our food supply with what we have to do to make sure our neighbors have enough groceries on their tables.
And we're saying that I've been on several meetings where Steve McHenry has been on, and he has such a it comes with such wisdom. Steve, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have anything you would like to add that you're seeing?
I can't add much to the conversation. Karen Fedor reported at the meeting yesterday on the loss of the funding for the school feeding program. So that's really about what I know about that. So not really able to add much more. It's just a very challenging time.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, back to you, Summer.
Great, and thank you to everyone who just gave updates. Meg, Joe, we really appreciate it. And hopefully you're seeing some of the messages in the chat coming through saying thank you as well. A couple quick announcements. These are just the upcoming meetings to be aware of. The next Environment and Production Committee meeting will be on April 10th. That'll be really similar to this meeting in the sense of walking through what the updates are from the ad hoc work groups, understanding some of the preliminary recommendations, that kind of thing. Our next full FSRC meeting will be on April 17th, and that will be a debrief of the Maryland General Assembly session with our colleagues at CHHS. So that'll be a great moment to reflect on the status of the food system related bills that we've all been following this session. And then we'll have the next of this committee's meetings, distribution and access, on April 24th. And then, we have a couple more of the weekly legislation monitoring meetings. I think we've only got 2 more of those. So if you're interested in keeping up with some of the final activities that we're going to see this session, good to stay up to date on those. And there's more information on that here. If you have any questions about how to join the weekly legislation tracking meetings, feel free to reach out and we're happy to help you get set up on those. Last thing to flag, and I know we've gone through this a few times, so I won't belabor it too much, but we are working on a slightly accelerated timeline for the annual report relative to last year. This was based on suggestions from folks within the FSRC that it would be helpful to send draft recommendations on the earlier side to state agencies that are relevant. Relevant meaning impacted in some way by that recommendation and therefore may have some feedback or input to give. So the main date to be aware of is the first one. We are asking committees to share draft recommendations with MDEM by April 30th. So that means today is going to be a really good moment to talk through where those recommendations are at right now. The ad hoc work groups probably still have some work to do revising them. And then, the committee will kind of come to an understanding of what the kind of recommendation package looks like that you want to start sharing with state agencies. We'll talk a little bit more about that process toward the end of this meeting, things to think about as you're preparing to do that. But the intent here is really to give state agencies the first 2 weeks of May to go through and provide comments. And obviously, if things are changed and additional comments are needed after that, we'll obviously continue following through that process. Everything else here should look pretty typical for what you've seen in past years. And especially last year, I think the timelines are relatively similar after that, meaning that you'll be voting on final recommendation submissions toward the end of May. We'll get final feedback from all of the council members in June, all with the intent of wrapping up the final report and voting on it by mid-July. So that's what we're looking at with the report timeline. And again, the first deadline is really the main one to be thinking of. And with that, we can jump into some updates from the work groups. All right, these are just some general questions to think of when you're giving your updates, but really feel free to share what you think is most relevant for this group, and especially if there's any challenges that you have. But one of the things we really want to check in about is understanding what progress each of the work groups has made in drafting recommendations. Is it a new recommendation? If you're revising a previous recommendation, how are you thinking about changing the scope? Are you seeking external subject matter expertise that maybe you haven't been able to connect in yet, so we can provide support in this group to do that? And any other next steps or support that are needed to complete the recommendations. So with that, I will take us into the first work group, which I know Diana has been leading around building capacity for local food councils. Diana, I have the document you shared with me. Do you want me to move over to sharing that screen so you can see it? Okay. Yeah.
We are going to submit a recommendation, and as you can see with the form that Summer is going to share with you, we've already started the recommendation. Summer, if you go down to the recommendation title, it's to strengthen capacities for local food councils. We feel strongly that this is something that we need to look at the state, and we do need to put a financial ask to it. And you can see the key actions: to state level coordinate, to facilitative knowledge and exchange, to support for residents, organization capacity and building. We strongly believe that these strategies will allow local food councils to operate more efficiently and drive food security initiatives and create a resilient community-driven food system. So I feel this group has really been working very hard, and I think we'll probably, after our next meeting, we'll probably come up with a solid recommendation that we can submit. We're just really struggling around the ask. Before it was for, the previous recommendation was for a part-time coordinator. We're feeling very strongly that you have to have some employee that's being paid to have a buy-in. And that's one of the reasons why we're just really interested on how some of these food councils are supporting the work that they're doing within the counties. But we don't want this recommendation to go away because we feel that because Maryland is so broad, that if we don't have a food council in every jurisdiction, there's no way that we can address those individual needs that we may see that is so vastly different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. Maybe I'll just pause there and see if anyone, after looking at this recommendation, has any thoughts or questions for Diana or the other folks in this work group.
I actually have a question. This is Pam. Diana, we being the Eastern Shore are looking at establishing 3 food councils, 1 mid, lower, and upper shore. We're on the ground. We haven't, no one has met or anything yet. But is there a statewide, meeting, once we kind of get established, should we reach out to you or where would we go after when we get to that point?
We actually do. It's not with my committee. It's with Stephanie's committee. What's the name of Stephanie's?
Environment and Production, but I think it's actually with Communication and Coordination Committee. Is that where you were going to jump in and say?
Yes.
Nancy?
And
Nancy, were you going to jump in there?
I was going to say the same thing you said. It's actually Communication and Coordination. It was through with Michelle because it started with the Montgomery County.
Okay. And how often did we say that they were going to come, the local food councils were going to come? Was it once a month or was it quarterly?
I think right now we've actually only got it biannually, but that could increase to quarterly. But Pam, that's all to say. Definitely you can reach out to those of us at MDEM so I can share my contact information with you hopefully when those get started up so we can make sure that y'all are in the loop with the other food councils that are meeting, and hopefully we can increase the frequency of that.
Awesome. And Nancy is like my new best friend as well. So she's part of that effort. So between the two of us, and I think Beth, I saw her on here as well. We'll get in touch. But thank you.
Excellent.
Well, great. Diana, is there anything that you think warrants further discussion for these recommendations? You said the group is having a little bit of a struggle around the ask. Is that kind of narrowing in on if it's a funding ask, what the funding level would be, figuring out where kind of any of the state level structure would sit within state government? What are the things that are kind of open questions that y'all are still brainstorming about?
Everything you just said, Summer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Especially in this climate, we just don't know, but we have a delegate on this committee and he said just continue to ask.
Well, that's fantastic. Does anyone have any additional thoughts or comments on this work group recommendation before we move on into another one of the ad hoc work groups?
I do want to add, Summer, we are thinking more than just a part-time coordinator because we all know that there's so much work that goes into facilitating and organizing. So I know that we are looking at asking for more than we previously have asked for.
Gotcha. Thanks for sharing that, Diana. And with that, let me see if I can successfully move us over to the other screen. I will move us to the next ad hoc work group committee, which is around food as medicine. And Joe, I believe you're leading that. If there's anything you want to share in terms of recommendation status.
So my first qualification was my understanding from Annika was the leader was only responsible for trying to schedule the follow-on meetings. So I asked everybody else who was on our meeting yesterday to pipe in and correct me if I get anything wrong. But Teresa, Heather, Beth were all on with me. And we had reached out to a number of folks to get some external input. And we had Mark, I can't remember, Radner, I think, from CRISP, which is the State Health Information Exchange, join us, as well as Allie McStudy from the Department of Health Cancer and Chronic Disease Unit. And they were very helpful in sort of pointing out some ongoing activities in addition to the Montgomery County Food as Medicine grants that Heather's team does. Mark had pointed out and reminded us of the FAST program that University of Maryland is doing with Maryland Food Bank, as well as Movable Feast and Meals on Wheels. So that was helpful in thinking about the existing some of the existing programs. And we would really love to have direct input from Maryland Medicaid and I always remember this wrong, the Hospital Health Systems Cost Review Commission that has the AHEAD model, and whether food as medicine fits in with them. And we would love their perspectives on how far their thinking has developed on food as medicine, and the set of concerns of what is and possible more easily and more difficult, and what could only come with more difficulty as we frame this. So I'll stop there and turn to anybody else that was in our little ad hoc work group.
Thanks, Joe. I'll just chip in that, I think it's pretty well documented that food as medicine strategies reduce overall lifetime health costs for participants, and, nutritional food access is a key component of a healthy patient. I think the challenge is that food as medicine programs are expensive and high cost, both in terms of the food as well as the administration required to keep those programs running. And involve data collection, and there's a wide variety of data security challenges, and also referral pathways from a healthcare provider to a food assistance organization. And so I think everyone's in agreement that it's a good idea and that these programs work, and also how, what are the unique levers of state government to move these priorities forward beyond, just investing money in that work. And so I think we'd be happy to crowdsource suggestions from, all the folks here on what that could potentially look like, especially in a budget, a challenging budget situation. Meg?
Yeah, one other thought for me, there is an existing, Joe, in terms of what you're saying, there's an existing coalition of food as medicine. I don't know if they're all practitioners, but probably mostly, that's being formed by Sue Elias at Movable Feast. And they have some funding to build this coalition. They also have a very deep knowledge of what would be required from the state to move this work forward. And it lives in, it's where you're going with the Medicaid direction, but it's the 1115 waivers or in lieu of service status. And so I would recommend reaching out to her. I had hoped she would join your work group, but I would recommend another outreach to her just to get her perspective on the table as far as what's already been tried, what's already in place, where the work is going. She's a bona fide expert in the space. So I'm happy to help if I can.
Absolutely. They were having a staff retreat yesterday.
Got it.
So none of them were able to join us. From the Capital Area Food Bank perspective, we had a great meeting with them. And we were, we're very interested in participating with that and having them sort of join as an external participant in this work group.
Yep, perfect.
But I think in thinking about the council as a whole, we did want to make sure that there was a agency owner for any recommendation that we develop, and a receptivity to taking ownership of that.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Well, thanks to everyone who just shared on that. Just to kind of recap, it sounds like there's been really great engagement through this group, lots of information gathering to understand what's already out there. You're starting to piece together what the recommendation options could be and are actually beginning to reach out to some of the folks within Maryland Medicaid and the other commission that you mentioned to see what is feasible or maybe has already been put on the table before. And then there's the question that you and Heather mentioned of, what is maybe the easier option versus the more difficult option. So it sounds like things are really moving along here. Do you all feel confident with kind of the timeline coming up for recommendations? Is there anything where you need additional expertise, or does that kind of sum up where things are right now?
So ideally, if we could find the right contact for within the Medicaid agency around their 1115 waiver, and then someone from the Health Systems Cost Review Commission that's leading up their work on developing the AHEAD model.
Yeah, gotcha. And Meg, the person that you were mentioning from Movable Feast, did you say that that person has potentially already been in contact with Maryland Medicaid and might have some of those contacts that Joe is looking for?
Yeah, I think that's possible.
Awesome. Okay, well, let us know how we can help with trying to find those connections. I have a feeling that other folks on this call will be more helpful than I will, but standing by to help if I can, Joe. Awesome. I'm going to move us. Go ahead.
A request comes from another agency.
Well, that's true too. Happy to, yeah. If the at maryland.gov is helpful, always happy to be the one sending. All right. Moving on to cold storage, which Diana has been leading. And Diana, I hope I have the right document for this, but let me know if I don't. I'll switch over. I believe you all were starting with the recommendation from last year and starting to kind of work from there. But I'll let you jump in and just let me know if you want me to move anywhere in the document.
I have I thought that I'd actually started filling out the form, the required form, but I can talk about this. Yes, we're working on a recommendation. This one is difficult for me because I don't have a lot of knowledge around cold storage. So I'm really depending on the team to come together to help me support this and see how we want to move forward. We know that anything with cold storage, it's a large ask. It's a lot of money. So I really don't have a lot to say except that we are working on a recommendation for this. There was someone on the call that works only in Prince George's County. And Heather, you may know it's a foundation that has been doing cold storage in PG County. And she was very informative on that call. Heather, you know,
I think it was probably Alex, who works with the Morningstar Foundation.
yes, it was the
Yeah, and they
Morningstar
actually work in Prince George's, Montgomery County, and DC. So they have some regional perspective. That's exactly who I was thinking should be. We can loop her in, Diana.
She attended and she gave us a lot of information, Heather. But because she only works with those 3 areas, it kind of just left us, well, what can we do? And we walked away thinking, well, we need to look at more maybe foundations that may support this because of the cost. And she even said that it was very expensive.
With challenges for long-term maintenance,
Yes.
and also coordination of all the various individual infrastructures that are being built out.
And so I'm not sure what the work group wants to do with this. I'll have more information after our next meeting. But as I stated at the beginning, I'm kind of struggling with this for 2 reasons. First and foremost is because I don't know that much about cold storage. And then when I did do some research for Anne Arundel County, the expense that goes along with cold storage is very, very high. And saying that, I think that it's very important because it would stop food waste and it would be very beneficial for distribution. But I don't know how to address it. And if there's anyone on this call that can help me or guide me in the right direction, I'm open for suggestions.
Diana, I haven't, I mean, my experience would overlap with Alex's. I haven't been able to make these meetings, but happy to connect with you separately, at least to try to help if that would be useful.
That would, Heather. Thank you so much.
I think it was also tied into part of the Morningstar work that DC Central Kitchen was running a cold storage working group. I think they've stopped meeting and it's become more of just a listserv for everyone who's engaged on that issue. But I can connect you to the person at DC Central Kitchen who started that, and maybe she has more, folks that you could talk to about it.
Thank you, Anne Marie. So that's where I'm at with that, Summer.
Thanks, Diana. That sounds good. It sounds like right now you're kind of starting from the base of last year's recommendation. Great that Heather and Anne Marie have offered to help connect in additional expertise. And then it also sounds like the question is, this is a problem that requires a lot of funding. This is not a moment where there's a ton of funding to go around. So how do we get creative about different funding sources? So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to move us to the next one. Let's see. All right. Oh, this is you again, Diana. I put you in a row too many times. Hang on, let me get over to the other document that you shared with me. Here we go.
So
I'll hand it back to you.
This is very interesting because when we met, CEP was still in effect. And so we were looking to see how we could expand it to the counties that were not actually utilizing CEP. But my understanding now is that CEP is going away. So regardless, we still want to make a recommendation for expanding the community eligibility provision. And that would go away. That's the CEP. So I would need to take that out. But I think recommendation for expanding universal school meals. And what does that look like? And so I'm going to have to go back and reword some of these things because when I initially started this form, CEP was still available, and my understanding it works. We were not using it here in Anne Arundel County, but all the other counties that was using it felt very comfortable. And we did have Maryland Hunger Solution on this call. And CEP is still available for schools to use. Okay, Julie, you want to talk? You're on my group. You want to talk about this?
Sure, I can hop in. So CEP is still available, so no, don't have to panic about that yet. I think there is some general concern about what potentially could happen at the federal level. There have been some proposals and conversations around what could be cut from CEP. Or what could be changed within CEP that would make it more difficult for some schools to use, or some kind of groups or districts to use. So it does kind of make a recommendation a little bit difficult just with that unknown piece. But like Diana said, CEP has been very successful in the districts that are utilizing it and the schools that are utilizing it. So as much as we can, help support schools to opt in at the current level that we have, or the current regulations that we have around CEP. I think another kind of difficult piece, as with cold storage, this school meals is an investment. And so trying to get to universal school meals or trying to maximize the use of CEP would take additional funding for school districts to be able to opt in all of their eligible schools. So that would definitely have to be part of the recommendation as well, to try to make sure that we are funding our school meal programs at the appropriate level for them to be able to use these programs.
Did they say anything about, I know that when we were talking that they were going, what about the documentation and the request? Has anything changed around that?
So that might have been the conversation around free and reduced price meal applications. So we actually did have some folks from Montgomery County Public Schools on our last work group meeting, which was really helpful to get their input on some of the benefits and challenges and conversations that they have when they opt schools in and make those decisions. But one thing that we've heard, and not just in Montgomery County, this has been a conversation in a number of different counties, when schools or districts move to CEP, they don't need to collect free and reduced price meal applications anymore, which is great for the school nutrition programs, that they are able to, not go through that process of collecting and processing forms. But there are a number of other educational programs that rely on those numbers. And so there's kind of a continued conversation around how do we start decoupling some of those programs from the free and reduced price meal counts, so that schools can more easily use CEP and not disrupt the poverty measures that other programs use. So I think that would probably take some additional conversations with maybe some Title I folks or some Blueprint folks, but more of the stakeholders on the education side of things to try to figure out which programs still use those numbers and how can we best work to get them the poverty measures that they need without necessarily relying on free and reduced price meal applications forever.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
So it sounds like there's still some kind of uncertainties lingering around this particular set of recommendations. Julia, thank you for giving that information, and also emphasizing that, we've got some unknowns, which makes it a little bit more difficult maybe to work on this recommendation. I mean, Diana, from your perspective, is there anything that you or the group needs to be able to kind of take the next steps in moving this toward more of a recommendation?
I think everybody that we have on our committee are experts in this area. It's just coming up with a recommendation. And then it's just coming up with a recommendation, I think. Julia, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And this one might take some, I don't know what formats are allowable, but it might take like a plan A, plan B type of format just to account for some of the unknowns that we have floating around.
Yeah, I think that definitely, I'll just, kind of give my 2 cents on it. I think that seems like a totally reasonable format, especially for the environment that we're in right now. If there's going to be things we don't know by the time that we put this report out, or certainly, by the time we're starting to share it with agency folks. Any last thoughts on this ad hoc work group? Awesome. And I think, Diana, I think that was the last one that was specifically has you in the hot seat.
Yes.
So up next, we've got expanding food access. And I think Teresa's on the line. This group met this morning, and Shannon shared a couple highlights from it with me as well. But Teresa, I'll pass it to you if there's anything that, oh, maybe Teresa's not on the line. Are you here, Teresa?
She had a meeting.
Okay.
And so I'm going to fill in for her.
Oh, so it is you again.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Diana.
We did have a robust conversation, and yes, there will be a recommendation. We've already sent out a doodle poll to schedule the next meeting on what the recommendation may be. But today we talked a lot about farmers markets, and maybe it having a farmers market there's so many different cards that people have to use when they go to the farmers market. If we could just make it easier and simple. And then we thought that we also needed someone on the state level, like a new position. And Shannon, you want to add, is Shannon still on?
No, I think Shannon had to jump a little while ago.
But Teresa really talked a lot about a position in the state level. Where that position would be, we don't know, to coordinate the usage, because there was a lot of WIC benefits in her county that are not being utilized. And how do we make sure that those benefits are being utilized throughout the state of Maryland, not only in Garrett County? And it's just difficult if you have WIC, if you have Maryland Money, if you have SNAP, right there, those are 3 different cards that you have to present. So we're still working. This is a work in progress.
Well, thank you, Diana. I thought you were going to be off the hook for one of these, but appreciate the recap. It sounds like y'all are still kind of defining more about the recommendation, but you're honing in on the farmers market side of things and thinking about a coordinator position at the state level.
Yeah.
And it sounds like things are moving full steam ahead. You're getting the next meeting scheduled. Is there anything where you feel like additional support or expertise is needed, or is it really just kind of, staying the course and getting to the recommendation stage?
Getting to the recommendation stage. And I think
Cool.
there will actually be either 2 or 3 recommendations that comes, because we do still have CSA programs and community gardens.
Okay, that's helpful. So even though the focus so far has been farmers markets, there may be additional recommendations for those other categories too. That's super helpful. I'm going to move us to the next one. Okay, this is food date labeling. And we do have an update here that I can share, and other folks feel free to jump in, especially those who were part of the leadership discussion on this. There has not been a leader for this group. And so we had a discussion with the leadership group that includes, of course, Nancy and the committee leaders about what a good next step might be. We know there's obviously lots of interest in this topic within the FSRC for obvious reasons. It's really important. But given that, we didn't have kind of a clear person sort of raise their hand within the FSRC to be the leader, and we know that there's some work coming out of California and from the FDA that might actually make make it make more sense for us to take a wait and see approach and come back to this next year. The plan right now is to include some discussion of this topic within this year's report, but to put this food date labeling work group on pause and instead, pick up the recommendation side of things with next year's report once we have a little bit more information. But I'll let anyone who wants to jump in, Diana, Meg, Nancy, others, if there's anything else that folks want to say on this topic.
I think you captured it beautifully.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say it was a perfect recapture of the conversation. So nothing to add.
Awesome. Thank you, Meg. So that's good, because the last thing we needed was Diana raising her hand to be a leader of another one of these work groups. As much as we appreciate you, there's only so much one person can do. Now we have food system mapping, which I'll pass it to Meg. I've tried to capture a little on the slide. We have some great updates here, and it sounds like there may actually be a different outcome than a recommendation. So I'll let Meg describe it.
Yeah. So we've made some really good progress on putting together a map which mirrors the recommendations that we've made in years past. We are going to be looking. DoIT is the the State Department of Information Technology. We are going to be meeting with them to look at a map, an early draft of a map next Friday on the 4th. And just for information purposes, the Dawn Blanchard, who joined our ad hoc work group, has an intern, and she offered the intern's time to put a map together. And so as we were getting ourselves organized to get together and talk about that, in the process, she's like, well, we have a draft map to show you. So so we're going to meet Friday. We'll get another work group meeting scheduled just after that to bring everyone back together. The only updates that are meaningful at this point in time are that I think the big win will be that we can report out that there will be a map that will meet the requirements of the legislation. What's unclear until we have further conversation is maintenance of the map, and would DoIT be able to continue to house the map and update it, things like that. And then, so what Dawn did is we shared with her the recommendation from last year, which included a list of all the data sets that would be represented in the ArcGIS map. And so she and her intern have been able to acquire most of those. She was asking about some data sets that she couldn't get, and they include the following. So one is community eligibility provision enrollment, interestingly, that we just talked about that. So where that data lives, and I don't have more specifics about what she would be interested in there. TANF enrollment, Maryland certified local growers, which would include production, aggregation, and distribution facilities, and critical infrastructure, which is cold storage. And so this list is, well, so let me start at the beginning with this. So I pointed her in the direction of different state agencies and said, these are the places where that data lives. I do think, to your point, some are the at maryland.gov email address on an inquiry there. We'll move that request forward as quickly as possible. So so she is looking for those things now. That list was added. I didn't add that in I wasn't part of the group that added that to the recommendation last year. So I think that list raises some questions about data and data visualizations and what it actually means. So let's say you show where all the counties that have the highest level of CEP enrollment. Is that just at a county level? Is it an individual level? Like, there's some decision making that goes into map making that doesn't that question of where that decision making lives hasn't been answered yet. So that's the only point where I'm not 100%. I think we're at about 80%. This is an update versus a recommendation, but that 20% of, who's making the decisions about what data goes on the map or what the data that's in the map means. I think is still an open question. So there's a little bit of a chance that there might be a recommendation. We'll know more as we come out of the conversations with Do It, but yeah, making great progress.
That's fantastic. And that's even more updates than I realized had happened. So thank you for sharing that, Meg, and for sharing a little bit about the data sets that are still needed and some of the open questions about how this is housed and maintained into the future and how decisions are made about what data sets and at what level of granularity. So that makes a ton of sense. But I think this is such a great success story for a recommendation finding kind of an unlikely home and solution. So that is awesome. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts on what Meg just shared? It looks like we've got Lindsay in the chat and then Karen raised a hand. So Karen, go ahead.
Right. So just FYI, I know Do It is working with some of our folks here for mapping, GIS mapping, because I know they're asking me about farmers who are participating in the Certified Local Farm and Fish program and also organic farmers. So I'm not sure what they're doing. I haven't heard, but they were inquiring about that information. And then, yeah, definitely be curious about the conversation regarding the Certified Local Farm and Fish program and what is envisioned for the mapping purposes. And then I was on a call with DHS yesterday, and they just announced they have a dashboard for all the folks involved with SNAP, which is actually a pretty cool dashboard that has been developed for DHS.
That's great. Thank you, Karen. And then I see, Lindsay, your note about being added to the mapping subgroup. I'll make sure that your name is in that document that we have, Meg, with everybody's contact info.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Are there any more? Okay, no, that was it for the ad hoc work groups. So we're going to shift into talking about what the process will be for submitting draft recommendations to state agencies. So things to think about as we're preparing to do that. The first thing, as you know, obviously it sounds like everybody is still really kind of finalizing and getting clear on the recommendation. So understanding that's where we're at in the process. It is a good time to start thinking about which state agencies might make sense to reach out to for the draft recommendations. In some cases that might be really obvious. In other cases, you know, it may be that the right entity hasn't been identified yet. So that's a good thing to think about for the next time that these ad hoc work groups meet. Also, we kind of started talking about this because we started off this conversation just looking at the timeline, but also just being mindful of our intention to send the recommendations to state agencies in early May, you know, really in the next ad hoc work group meetings that you have, thinking through and projecting forward whether you'll be ready to do that by 4:30. Deciding who will send the recommendations over to MDEM. If I don't get the recommendations, I'll just reach out to the leaders, but if you have a plan for it, even better. And then also thinking about how feedback will be shared with this committee in general. We are asking the state agencies to provide comment by the 15th of May, and then how do we want to share that with this committee and kind of integrate it into the recommendations going forward. So I'll just pause there in case anyone has any thoughts or questions on this process in general. This might be a little bit different than we've done it in the past, so happy to kind of figure out together if there's things you think, you know, don't 100% make sense. But I'll pause there, and Meg, Diana, if you two have anything you want to jump in with, feel free.
Once the recommendation is submitted from the work group, who's gonna, and I've been asked this question, somebody's gonna formalize it, right? Or finalize it, right? Or is it submitted to state agencies just as it comes in?
Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, so obviously the ad hoc work groups are kind of putting everything into that template like you've all been doing. You'll finalize that within the work group. I think the question is, does there need to be a second step maybe where this committee looks it over before it gets sent over to MDEM and state agencies? Is that
Yes.
the question, Diana?
Yes.
Yeah, so I do think that's an open question. It probably is a good idea for it to be circulated more broadly, but I'll let you and Meg kind of weigh in on what you think makes sense there.
I feel like in the past we've held space to review the recommendations as a subcommittee. And obviously we're doing the reading outside of the subcommittee. But I do think that that kind of cross-pollination might be important when we get to the final written recommendations to make sure the committee members have a chance to see what the recommendations are. Fresh eyes can do some good sometimes. So if we can work it in timing wise, I'd support it.
Yeah, I mean, we could think about something where if we wanted to, so if we're sending it to, MDEM by the 30th, we could think about if it's possible, like a week earlier or a few days earlier to send it around to this committee. And then I know we just went through it, but the next meeting of this committee will be before April 30th. So that could be an opportunity to kind of talk through the recommendations live as well. Which obviously, will not be the perfect forum if there's like bigger questions or changes that need to happen, but it's a good way to get kind of final eyes and feedback on it. So maybe we want to pick a day a few days before the 30th or a few days before this next meeting of this subcommittee to send it around and then plan to talk about it in this committee meeting the next time it meets. How does that sound?
That sounds good.
I think it does too.
Awesome. So I'll follow up with that over email with everybody, but especially the folks who have very kindly raised their hands to be leaders for the ad hoc work groups. Basically, it just sounds like we'll probably be looking to have the recommendations drafted a few days before the 30th. Any other thoughts or questions on this process? Awesome. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, now we just have a little space as usual in case there's any updates from the group on other things that you want to share and make sure people are aware of. So I will just open the floor in case anyone has other updates that they want to share with the group. Okay, emphatic silence. And with that, I think, we covered a lot of really great updates at the beginning, or not necessarily great, but I think important discussion at the beginning. But if folks do have other updates to share, don't hesitate to reach out to the FSRC email. And we're happy to get them out to this group. And with that, we've got a couple next steps here. I'll follow up about what we just discussed on timeline and getting final eyes from this committee on recommendations before we send them over to state agencies. There's a couple other things that I know were in the chat as smaller next steps. And everyone has their marching orders for what to do within the ad hoc work groups, which is really what the big next steps are before the next time we meet. And so with that, as always, these are the emails where you can reach us if you have any questions or if things come up. And thank you all for being here for this meeting today.
Thank you, Summer.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.